started. So we're going to jump outside. I got kicked out to the porch here. So we're going to jump inside. We got Courtney inside to lead our presentation today. We got a DJ run the camera, and Kaylin, you may see her running back and forth grabbing things. And we got a couple of helpers with us today, Justin and Jodessa back there too. So Courtney, it's all you.
All right, thanks Nancy, I appreciate it. Like she said, my name is Courtney Goodman. I'm the Hunter Training Officer for Western Kentucky. So mainly I do orange card classes, hunter education classes, gun safety, help with mentor hunts, stuff like that. Today we are going to be teaching the Bowfishing 101 class. Just a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Georgetown, Kentucky, went to Murray State, graduated from Murray State. While I was there, I came to camp during the summer and worked, and that's where I got introduced to bow fishing. My first time bow fishing, just a friend here at camp let me borrow their bow, walked on the bank, shot my first fish, and I was hooked. Thereon, I was hooked. It definitely is a great way to bring two sports together. I love to fish and I love to bow hunt. And, you know, in the summertime, there's not really a whole lot to bow hunt. So this was a perfect way to combine both of those and have a lot of fun doing it. I want my other helpers here to introduce themselves. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Baldwin. I'm actually her brother. I got into bow fishing by attending Murray State University, and I came to work at Camp Curry for a couple summers, and I got the opportunity to go out on a boat for the first time to bow fish, and like Courtney said, it was very addicting. I was hooked right away. I'm also an avid bow hunter and fisherman, so combining the two sports together was a very interesting way to join a new sport.
Hi, I'm Jodessa Bowman. I'm originally from St. Genevieve, Missouri. I ended up going to school at Murray State University where I met these lovely people. I was lucky enough to get to go out on his boat actually for the first time and go bow fishing. It was absolutely amazing. It was just something I never even imagined. So it was really fun, and I'm glad to be here to help teach you.
So unfortunately, we couldn't hold, you know, the in-person bow this year. We would have loved to take some new bow fishermen out on the water. So that just means you have to stick with us and come back next year, right, so that you can get that opportunity. But today we're going to do the best we can. Like Nancy said, we just had a monsoon come through. We planned on filming this out on the boat, but we're going to do part of it in here, and hopefully at the end we can go down to the boat and kind of show some stuff there too. I think the rain's going to kind of dissipate a little bit on us. Where's my paper? Okay, so a little bit about bow fishing itself. Bow fishing is basically fishing, but with an arrow, okay? The popularity of bow fishing has really increased over the last 20 years, but it's been around for thousands of years. The Aztecs, the Incas, Aborigines, they've been bow fishing for you know, way back before we ever thought about it. They used not quite as specialized equipment as we have today. We've come a long way with our bows. As most of you know, you can pretty much get any type of bow nowadays. They make specialized bow fishing bows, or you know, you can use a regular hunting bow, anything like that. The first thing I want to tell everybody though, if you have a question during this, you don't have to wait till the end. Just go ahead, raise your hand, or do the unmute yourself. Ask your questions, because I'd rather answer them while we're going so you don't forget about what you were going to ask. The first thing we're going to talk about is equipment today, okay? So to get started, you don't have to go spend a bunch of money on a bow fishing bow. Don't get me wrong, the first time I tried it, I was using a pretty nice bow of a friend of mine's, but they were like, oh, just any bow pretty much will do it. Any type of hunting bow, anything that'll go up pretty much over 20 pounds, you can bow fish. I know people that even bow fish with the Matthews Genesis bows, which are what the students use in school for the NASP program. We don't use those because they're great for learning, but for what we're doing, we want a little bit more poundage. Justin?
It's a bow fishing model that they came out with. It's called the CUDA. I think if you look it up. My bad. And this is a great bow for if you want to go ahead and spend the money for someone who is a beginner, because of the wide poundage range. It is designed for what we call snap shooting and bow fishing. If you've ever shot a recurve, it's that style let off versus what a compound bow that you might hunt with, it'll have let off as where the recurve style will not, which will allow you to shoot fish a little quicker. You're seeing past the hump, you can actually fish.
Didn't make sense. I'm gonna break down a little bit of what he talked about. Draw weight, first of all. Draw weight is the poundage. It's the weight basically that you are pulling back when you draw that bow. So how much weight, if it's 40 pounds, when you're drawing, you're pulling 40 pounds back. Now when he talked about let off, okay, let off is with a compound bow that has a cam, as you draw back on the bottom will rotate over. When that rotates over, I'm holding just a small amount of poundage here. There's not much here at all. But when I'm drawing, it's that 40 pounds. That's great, but the only bad thing about that with bow fishing, it slows you down just a little bit because you got to get, like he said, over that hump. You got to get that cam to rotate over, and that can slow you down a little bit. Like he said, with this bow, snap shooting, you don't have to draw it back all the way. You can literally, I grabbed her. You can just pull back a little bit, snap shoot. You can pull back all the way, snap shoot. And I want to reiterate, I'm not using an arrow in here. We're in a building. I just want to show, but make sure if you're pulling a bow back that doesn't have an arrow on it, do not let it go because that's called dry firing. When you dry fire, all that kinetic energy that you're holding back, normally when you shoot, it goes into the arrow to push the arrow out. You shoot without an arrow on it, that kinetic energy's got to go somewhere. Where's it going? It's going into your limbs, and it can crack your limbs. So be very careful about that. But I just wanted to show you the difference in what snap shooting and, you know, that kind of stuff, how that goes. So like Justin said, the Genesis here, they've come out with a bow fishing specifically for that. How much was that bow? Do you remember?
It was under 300, but it was over 250.
Right.
So about $250. And that came with the reel and everything? Or
No, we don't.
okay, so you already, that was bare bow. So when we say bare bow, we're talking about, did it have a rest?
No, we don't.
Yes, it came with
Did it come with a rest? You're basically comes with the rest. It probably came with the finger tabs, but it didn't come with the bottle and the arrow. Okay, so that's what we're talking about when we get to there. Okay, a lot of people like to just turn their hunting bow into a bow fishing bow. You don't want to go out and buy a specialty bow. Some people just in their garage have a bow from whether it was their grandfather's, fathers, their kid bow. I started out with a youth. This is one of the first bows we turned into a bow fishing bow. Don't get me wrong, it's a little harder to use just on the fact that it's big. It takes up a lot of space. It's kind of heavy, but it will work. Okay. Now you notice there's sights on this bow. We just didn't take them off. You don't need them when you're bow fishing. We'll get into sight picture and how to shoot a little bit later, but just know some of this is extra for bow hunting that you don't necessarily need when it comes to bow fishing. I showed this bow a little bit ago. This is just a real short, compact compound bow. You can hunt with this, you can deer, but we've pretty much just used it for bow fishing. We don't have any other gear on it. It's great because it's super lightweight, and like if you're hiking in somewhere, you're not on a boat, you're hiking in, this would be a great bow to be able to get into a spot and not have to carry a lot of weight with you as you're doing it. And then we have my bow, which is the AMS Hooligan. This is a specific bow fishing bow. AMS is a brand that makes bow fishing equipment. I went, if you read the online posts that or all the information I put on there, I bow fished for 9 years before I ever bought a actual bow fishing bow. The first bow I had was a youth Pearson. I think it went to like 30 pounds. It was a great bow. I killed a lot of fish with it. Then after some wear and tear, I decided I'm going to upgrade a little bit, and I went to a Matthews Mission. Matthews Mission is one of those bows that can really be adjusted as far as the draw weight goes. So I used it for a little while, and then Justin got his awesome bow fishing boat, and we started doing some tournaments, and I decided it's time to spend a little money and get a little bit nicer bow. I spent $350 on that. I think it was without the reel. I think it was about
Yours
$350.
is a higher poundage.
Mine will go up to 50 pounds, whereas Jodessa's will go to 40. Do I shoot 50 pounds? No, I shoot 40 pounds. I may go up to 45. I'm still working on it. Gotta work on my guns a little bit, but I'm hoping to get to 45. But I don't think I'll ever go over 45 because if you spend a whole night on the water shooting fish, you're liable to shoot 100 times in a really good night.
Right. I can shoot 50 pounds easily all night, but I keep mine set at 44 to 45. It doesn't wear you out as much.
You don't want to wear yourself out and then start making bad habits and bad shots for sure. So we talked about snap shooting. You notice we don't have a recurve bow here. We don't use recurves just because of how long they are, and it's really typical on a boat with rails that the limb will hit the rail of the boat and stuff, and they're just so long. They're a little bit harder to maneuver, but they work great. They can do the snap shooting, because you don't have any let off. You don't have to pull all the way back. You can kind of play with it, but we just prefer these bows just because they're lighter and a little compact. Recurves are pretty light though, but they're just so long. I don't know that I've ever seen one that was short enough to kind of do what we want to do with it. All right, so the next thing, and thank you all for your questions, because we're kind of gearing this around the questions that y'all asked. So someone asked, how do you set up a bow? Like, you've got a bow at home, you know that it's between 25 and say, 45 pounds. That's a good average. I mean, you can kill fish at 20 pounds, but you're going to be a lot closer and you're going to have a lot more pull outs, which basically means the arrow pulls out the fish before you get it in the boat. So if you've got a bow that's around that range that you think is comfortable for you to shoot, really all you have to do is get 3 things for the most part. First, you need to get a reel, okay? Now, reels come in. There's several different companies that make reels. There's several different reels. We prefer the AMS Bowfishing series. Basically, the main difference is just the reel ratio. One reel's faster than the other. But we like this reel because it's lightweight. I mean, it's just a plastic bottle for the most part. It's lightweight, and you do not have to push a button. If you shoot, everything's good. You don't have to push a button. If you see some of the other reels, if you're familiar with like a Zepco 33 fishing pole, those are very similar to some of like the other brands. Like I think Cajun has a reel like that. And Muzzy, you have to push the button before you shoot. Just like if you're casting the pole, you got to push the button and let off. Well, I don't know how many times I've been bow fishing with people with those reels and they forget to push the button and there goes your $20 or $30 arrow in the lake and it's gone now, right? I mean, it literally happened to a friend of ours a few weeks ago. He was like, well, I'm going to turn my drag down real low so in case I forget, I'll be good. That didn't work. He forgot and he lost his arrow pretty quick. So that's why we recommend these. Now, we do know that they have come out with a reel like that you don't have to push the button. But here's the downside to it. You pick up this reel, you pick up that reel, there's a significant weight difference. And if you're standing there all night holding a bow, you want it as light as it can be so that you can, keep doing it without getting too tired. Also, after a lot of times though, when you buy a bottle or a reel, it will come with an arrow. Not always, but I recommend going ahead and getting the kit because I think it's just a little bit cheaper to go ahead and get the kit. So when you buy your reel, get an arrow with it. There's all kinds of different arrows. You want to talk a little bit about the different types of tips?
Sure. Yeah. Here we have a 3-prong interlock grapple tip. So what this does is as it penetrates the fish, these barbs will open up and lock the arrow into the fish so that it can't pull out. In order to release the barb so that you can get it off the fish, you unscrew the tip and these barbs. So this is my preferred arrow tip. I've used quite a few over the past few years, and this is one that I seem to not lose as many fish with.
Makes sense. It's holding the most surface area.
Right, it has a little bit longer barbs to keep. We got some mud in the thread, so the tips don't want to go back on. There it goes.
We tried to shoot some fish last night.
So as you'll see, this versus these other.
Similar one. It's just got shorter barbs on it and it's there to hold into the fish. And it works, but your preferred one is the
Right. Some of the problems I've had with this very barb grapple is sometimes throughout the night, if you don't keep it turned tight, it'll start to loosen up. And as you see, it doesn't take much. I'm sorry. It doesn't take much, and these barbs will turn backwards. So that's one of the reasons I don't shoot these quite as often. But as long as you're keeping your eye on it, make sure it stays tight, you shouldn't have any problem.
I've pretty much gotten in the habit of pretty much every time I shoot, when I load my arrow, I reach up to the top and just try to tighten that tip as much as I can, just to make sure, because, you know, you shoot in the water, you keep shooting and shooting, eventually just the water itself can kind of loosen that up and cause it to twist, and next thing you know, you're losing the tip of your arrow.
Hey, Courtney, you guys hear me?
Here's another common type of arrow.
Hey, we're going to switch up phones here. That phone's got a low bandwidth, and we're starting to lose the connection a little bit. So Caitlin's coming in with a different phone. So I think people will be able to hear a little bit better. Is it breaking up for you guys? Heads up, thumbs down. Okay. It's gotten a little glitchy, so we're gonna reset here real quick. See if we can get a little better connection for you all.
What was the last thing y'all heard?
I gotta switch it over here real quick.
Probably turn that one off.
Nancy,
Yes, ma'am.
this is Judy Hayden from Calhoun.
Judy, how are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm so glad to see you.
It is nice to see you. I wasn't catching all my names here.
It's okay. I know you're busy, so you go. And I'm going back on mute. But I just had
we're fighting with technology is what we're doing right now.
that's okay. I'm muting again.
That's the hardest part. I can't see all of y'all's lovely faces. I'm just looking at a black phone.
All right, let's try it again, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's the rain, the storm we got going on right now, but we're struggling with our connection here a little bit.
The last thing y'all heard, was it about the tips? Were you still good there, or when did it cut out?
Well, we're still cut out at the moment. Let me get. We're just fighting low bandwidth, I think, guys. I apologize.
Nancy, I could hear Courtney a second ago too.
Can you see me?
All right,
Yeah.
Go again, Courtney. Let's see what happens here.
All right, start right back there. That's not too far.
Yeah, that
All right.
sounds-
This is the
I guess it was good for a second, but now it's
yeah,
not.
now we're locked up again.
Yeah.
Try your phone again, DJ. All right, technical difficulties on a rainy day. It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without that kind of craziness.
That's just a tough room to get a signal in down there.
The office number, whatever that is.
Hey,
We've been doing pretty good, but we had a fun little storm go through here, and it's still raining on us, so I don't know if that had something to do with it or not, but we'll get DJ back in here and see if that phone works a little bit better. okay for you all to sit there and hear like every other word. So we're trying to figure out which phone might work better here for you all.
It's not charging.
Bunch of slackers out there at Camp Curry.
Yeah, you hush up, man. You hush up before I mute you. I have the power.
Don't you have another Zoom to be running, Brent?
Hey,
All right, let's
theirs
go.
was running just
Right
fine.
now. All right, I think we got a good picture right now, guys. Let's run it.
All right. Like I was saying, this is another common type of arrow. It's made by Muzzy. It's called the guard tip, I believe, guard point. It works the same way. As you see, it's got 2 barbs instead of 3 that rotate backwards, and as you shoot through the fish, as you pull out, these barbs will stick just to the side like that and stick in the fish. And it works just basically the same way. You loosen up the tip, and this is an older arrow, so I may not be able to get it with my hands. But you loosen up the tip, and these will rotate backwards, and you can pull it out of the fish just as you would the other 2 types.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions so far about the reel and the arrow?
Yes.
The equipment all together. Go ahead.
Yeah, on the reels, and I have to ask a question because I shoot left-handed. Are they handed?
Are they what?
Are they handed? Will it
Yes.
fit one fit a left-handed bow or a right-handed bow?
Yes, this actually right here is a left-handed reel. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
At least one.
They're both left-handed. Yeah, we have
Yeah.
two. We have 2 left-handed reels in case we ever have a left-handed person that comes out with us. But yes, it just mounts. So with a left-handed bow, everything's backwards, right? Where your rest mounts, where everything mounts is just backwards. So this, when we show you how to mount this reel in just a second, you're just going to do the opposite of what we can just mount the left-handed. Well, no, because that's not left-handed bow. But basically the difference is left-handed, your reel is going to be on the left side because you're going to be reeling with your left hand because you hold the bow with your bow hand, the one where you hold the bow, and your drawing hand is the one you reel with, okay?
A little bit more about the reel. As you shoot, your line will go out. It's got a trigger that you'll use your index or middle finger, whichever you prefer. You pull it slightly in, and it will grab the string. You reel in, and it'll bring your arrow back to you. These are pretty simple to mount onto a bow. All you need is a set of Allen wrenches, and oftentimes when you buy the kit, it will include the wrenches. It's got a little mounting bracket here that you mount to the opposite side. Well, actually, it mounts exactly where you would mount your sights on a bow. And then the reel itself has one main wing nut bolt that will screw in to that bracket. And the way it works is you can adjust, well, once you get it in there, tighten it up just a little bit, not too tight, and then you can adjust, slide the reel back, forward or backwards, as to where you would want it to be for your fingers to grasp the trigger.
Like Jodessa's got small hands. Hers is probably back about as far as it can go, so her fingers can reach it. Whereas my husband, he's got big giant hands. His is as forward as it can go. They're very adjustable to fit anybody, and that's one thing we really like about them is because anybody can shoot and use them. That's a big plus for them for sure. So we've talked about the reel, we talked about the arrow, and now the third biggest thing is the rest.
Hey, Courtney.
Hey, Jessica, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. I got a question on the reel. You said where you're grabbing with your fingers, I guess that's a trigger, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
So do you see this thing right here?
Yes.
Normally, we tuck that in to just get it out of the way. But what that is attached, as you look, if you can look up top, you see how that's moving up and down?
Oh, yes.
See it. As you push that in, that's a wheel, and it's putting pressure on that line. As you put pressure on that line, then you can reel it up.
Okay.
But if you're not holding the trigger, it lets the line come freely. So you don't hold the trigger while you're shooting, but then when you're ready, you pull the trigger in and put a little pressure on it, and then you can reel that line in.
Okay, gotcha.
Is that
Yes, perfect.
awesome? And like I said, that's this type of reel. There's different types, but this is the one we prefer, and we don't even have any of the other reels because we just don't use them. But with I know the Muzzy one, it's just like reeling in a fishing pole. It's just basically like a Zebco 33 reel, and you just reel it in and then push the button when you're ready to shoot. Is that good? All right, let's move on to the rest. So there's different type of rest. A lot of you who may bow hunt, there's different rests. There's drop away rests. There's whisker biscuits. There's a little bit of everything. For us, bow fishing reels or rests are a little bit different because you're going to be moving around a lot. You're not going to be sitting still in a tree stand. You're going to be moving around. And so you really want to make sure that your arrow is not going to come off of your rest. So a couple of the ones that we prefer, this is an AMS one, right? I think this one. No, that one is. Okay. So as you see, I will show you exactly how that arrow, there's a little notch right here that's open. You just slide that arrow in there and it will sit on this roller just like that. And that arrow, whether you're moving your bow around or not, it's not coming out of that rest. And the same with this one, except there's a little kind of rubber piece. When you push your arrow in there, it keeps it from coming out. You can put some slip tape there to make it a little slicker. But the biggest thing is with the rest, you want to make sure that your arrow is not going to fall out of that rest, because you see a fish real quick and you go to shoot real fast and your arrow fell out of your rest. That can be, for one, it's dangerous, but for two, that can cause you to dry fire your bow. It pops off of the knot pops off the string easily. So I definitely recommend getting a bow fishing rest. I've seen people use whisker biscuits before.
They work pretty good.
They do work because most whisker biscuits completely encompass the arrow. They will work, but just anything that will hold that arrow on the whole time. That's the big thing. Jess, you want to talk a little bit about mounting one of those? How to put the rest on?
Yeah. So the rest is pretty easy to put on, just as well as the bottle. Just like a rest, any type of rest on a bow, all it does is there's a little groove below where you would mount your bottle or your sights on a bow, just where you would mount a normal rest. It screws in right there, and you'll wrap it around to sit right alongside your direction of fire, where your arrow would be knocked. So what you would do is, after you get this mounted, I tend to not tighten it down all the way. I will knock an arrow, and then we did not bring the tool with us, but we actually have a level that attaches to your arrow. We forgot to bring it. And what you can do is you'll slowly make adjustments up and down, left and right with the two screws. There's only two. The one attached to the bow itself is how you will adjust the rest up and down. And then the screw that is mid arrow rest, you will use that to adjust left and right. So what you'll want to do is get your level to go up and down. And then as you shoot, a lot of people, if you bow hunt, you'll know a little bit about maybe paper tuning your bow as to making fine adjustments on an arrow rest. With a bow fishing bow, you don't have to get that detailed into it. I've swapped a lot of these rests out over the years, and I don't get as detailed. A lot of times I won't even use the level, to be honest.
Your eye makes a good level, right?
Right.
I can tell right now that's not level. It's up
Yes.
in the back end. Yeah.
We haven't shot this bow. It was actually a friend of ours that they gave it to us. But like I said, you don't have to put that quality work into putting a rest on a bow fishing bow as you would a hunting bow. I'll get it about eye level each way, and then I'll actually sit out in the yard and practice shooting at a pop can or something, just to make sure I'm on target.
All right, so
Courtney, I'm going to interrupt real quick. Sorry. Everybody, you're fixing to get an email from me that says having trouble logging in, ? Just ignore it. That's for the people who haven't gotten in yet. So this is great. See y'all later.
Thanks, Britt.
You're welcome.
Okay, so like he said, we eyeball it because you're bow fishing. If you hold that up and you can see that it's pretty level, you're good. Now, if it was my compound bow, I'm gonna want to put a little bit more detail into it, but, and one thing too that I've noticed with my bow is that, oh, we haven't talked about finger tabs yet. Well, anyways, my finger tabs tend to slip on me. I need to put some brass knocking pieces to hold them in, but I'll be out on the boat and I'll look at my arrow and think, my arrow's not straight, and I'll just slide these down or up however I need to get it straight instead of moving the entire rest at that point. I need to get it set though, so with some brass knocking pieces to keep those from sliding up and down. I just haven't done that yet. So now let's talk about finger tabs. I didn't put that on the list of things you have to have because you don't have to have finger tabs. Now you'll notice we use finger tabs on all of our bows. It makes you a little quicker because a lot of people will use a release. There's two reasons I don't want to use a release. One is safety. Okay, if you've ever used a handheld release, you know how easy it is to hit that button. When you're bow fishing, it's not like hunting. You know, when you're hunting, you're shooting one time. We are shooting multiple times. We're drawing back and then letting down because the fish disappeared. You know, that's a little bit harder to do with a release, and it's very easy to hit that trigger on accident and shoot, you know, unintentionally. And when there's people around bow fishing, you never want to shoot unintentionally. So to keep it safe, we like the finger tabs, but also, I mean, if you're drawing back and trying to shoot quickly, it's a lot easier to just let go with your hand versus trying to get your release right and get on the trigger. So that's why we use this, but I know a lot of people do use releases. There's nothing necessarily against it, but just the way we fish, it's safer and it's a lot more efficient. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered that pretty well.
These finger tabs are cheap. I think you can get them for like $10. Here's some that we have on hand. Almost looks like I need to change mine out. The only thing about putting these finger tabs on is you do have to break the bow down. You got to take the string off. Not completely though. We have a bow press at the house, so we do that ourselves, but most people don't have a bow press. You go to your local archery shop, they can put these finger tabs on for you in like 5 minutes. They lower the bow down, they take one end of the string off, they thread those on and then put the string back on. It's a pretty quick process. And these will save your fingers. If you try to shoot with just using the string and not these finger tabs here, your fingers will be hurting by the end of the night. So I do recommend it's worth the $10 and maybe an extra $5 to get it mounted at your local bow shop. It's definitely worth it for sure. I didn't add that on there though, just because you don't have to have it. But as far as the main things you got to have to bow fish, your reel, your arrow, and your rest. And a bow, I guess, at that point. You kind of need a bow. Now let's talk about price. The main reason I say when you're getting into this, don't go spend a bunch of money on a bow because you're going to have to spend some money on the reel. That's the most expensive part. You can get one of these reels for about $100. Justin, do you know what the muzzies cost? I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if people get those because they're cheaper.
They are
slightly cheaper.
If I remember correctly, the AMS bottle kit with the arrow, maybe even, I think with the arrow it's about 120.
Yeah.
With the rest, maybe 150 if I'm not mistaken.
I know the rest by itself, they usually run around $30, depending on which one you get, 30 to 40. So the rest runs around 30 to 40 bucks. Your arrow, the cheapest is probably 15 to 20. Right. And then usually your guard. Yeah, usually your guard tip, the 2-pronged arrows. Your nicer arrows are going to be up in the 30s. I don't think there's any much more than 30 though, right? Yeah. So most of our arrows cost about $20 to $30 a piece. And that can get expensive, but I will say, don't think of it like every time you shoot, you're going to be losing an arrow. We've gone a whole year and used the same arrow for a whole year. And don't get me wrong, we have those nights where it's just like everything goes wrong and we lose 2 or 3 arrows for some reason or not. I accidentally kicked one off the boat a few weeks ago. But for the most part, when you invest in an arrow, as long as you take care of it, it's going to be fine and you'll be able to use it for a long time. The biggest issue we see is the nocks coming off. And that every now and again, a knock will come off and you'll have to either replace that knock or just buy a new arrow. Replacing the knock is a little harder than we haven't had a lot of luck with it. We've done it several times and you'll get some shooting out of it, but it just seems something with maybe the water always shooting in the water and stuff and shooting a lot constantly, it just puts a lot more wear and tear on those arrows. Whereas your hunting bow, you know, you're not shooting 50 times in a night or 100 times in a night, but they can last a very long time. So, and these reels, I mean, some of these reels here are over 10 years old. So the good thing is when you invest in this, it's not one of those things you're gonna have to keep buying. Once you have it, you have it. You may have to change the line out eventually, and I can show you. The line just comes in a little package like this. We like the AMS line, but there's all kinds of companies that make different lines, and that's about the main thing you have to replace. Yeah.
Courtney, Cabela's has that reel on sale right now for $109.
Really? The reel with an arrow?
No arrow, just the reel, the kit without the arrow for $109.
Okay, so about 100 bucks, a little over 100 bucks. I'm pretty sure you can get it around 100 bucks, maybe on Amazon. I think that's, which they could have gone up a little bit.
They actually have an older model I've seen for $89.99 at a few stores. I believe they do not have the arrow holder, as you see on these. The back side of the reel has this little groove plastic to hold your arrow. You can find some of the older model reels a little bit cheaper that don't hold the arrow. That's all on your preference.
So I recommend spending that extra $10, $15 on the arrow holder because, I mean, it makes things a lot less difficult. When you got arrows kind of hanging around, it just makes things a little bit easier. And normally, we just threw these on here real fast, but normally when we're on the boat with these bows set up, we have the arrows, we put them on like this so that the tip of the arrow is not pointing past the bow, so that if, you know, we get knocked around on the boat or something, you run into it, you're not stabbing yourself. The only thing sticking out is the back end, and that's not going to hurt you very much. But for just right now, the way they were laying, it worked pretty good like that.
Hey, Courtney, Jessica is asking, could you go over a little bit more about the difference between a bow fishing arrow and versus a hunting arrow?
Okay, so the main difference is what it's made out of. Most of your modern hunting arrows are going to be carbon, and you'll hear, you know, you always hear check your arrow before you go fishing. Bend it a little bit, or before you go hunting, bend it a little bit, listen for cracks and stuff. These are fiberglass. These are tougher. These are much, much tougher arrows. I mean, we shoot rocks with these things. And I mean, I'm telling you, we've never broken arrow. Have you ever broke? We've never broken arrow. These are very tough arrows. We don't cut these down. Like, you know, with your bow hunting arrow, a lot of people cut them down to your draw length. You don't have to cut these down. I know someone who has cut them down, but I don't really think it's helped him anyway. I think it was just worse. Yeah,
I don't think it shot right.
Yeah, I think at that point you're just wasting your time. I mean, this is not one of those things you have to be super precise about every little thing. Not like when you're setting up your compound to shoot a deer or something. This is a little bit more relaxed, a little bit easier. So you'll notice that there's no fletchings on this arrow. Sorry. Fletchings usually can be feathers or plastic, and it's just the veins back here that help guide that arrow through the air and gives it that twist. We're not going through the air for very long. We're hitting the water, so we don't need that. And then as far as the tip goes, the main difference would be, you know, we're not shooting a broadhead. We're basically shooting a field tip, a sharp field tip with some barbs on it. If you're the terminology for bow hunting, you're basically shooting a sharp field tip, which this one's not very sharp. It's been shot at a few rocks. And then you have the barbs on there that's going to hold that fish on. Does that cover? Was there any other questions on that?
What's that thing you're sliding up and down the arrow?
Okay, sorry about that. This is the slide. This is the arrow slide. And basically, this is how you tie your arrow onto your line. And I'll go ahead and just show that real fast while we're talking about it.
You want to explain it while I do this?
Yeah, that'd be fun. So if you'll look real close here, there's 2 holes in this slide. Justin's going to run that bow fishing line through one side and into the other, just like threading a needle. Sometimes it's a little hard. There you go. All right, now here's the trick, because the hardest part is getting this knot right. There's a little trick to this knot. So the way that I always do it is I grab it with my hand underneath like he has, twist it, and basically you're making a hole here, and it'll cross over. Can you see that decently, DJ? You're making a hole here, and then he's gonna run that through the arrow. He'll run it all the way through. And then he's gonna grab it at the end and pull it tight. And then you can just cut off whatever excess you have here. And that's basically how you tie a bow fishing arrow. He does it a little different because he likes to use his thumb. The way that he does it, it doesn't really matter how you do it. It's just as long as it works. I'll show you how I do it. I always like to start at the tip side of the arrow when I run it through, because it's a lot easier to run it over the barbs laying down versus laying up. Like threading the needle, guys. All right, so I like to bring it up to the top, pull enough line out that I can get a hold of it good. I will come from the underside and grab it in my whole hand like this. Then I will twist it. So basically I'm just twisting my arm, twisting my hand over. So it's under like this, twist my hand over, and inside where all my fingers are, that's the hole that I'm running the arrow through. So then I will run the arrow through that hole, bring it out, pull it tight, and you've got your knot. Were you able to see that decently? That's the hardest part, honestly, is remembering how to tie that arrow. It took me forever to learn it. I can't remember how many times Justin had to do that for me.
Are you intentionally leaving a big gap between the arrow and the knot?
So some people will, because they say that it lets your arrow fly a little freer. Justin doesn't do that, and he hasn't seen any difference. So honestly, it's personal preference. The reason I usually do is just because it's easier for me to tie the knot by leaving more string. But if the knot's up here, you're still okay. Because by the time you shoot and that arrow hits the water, this line is not really pulling on that arrow. It's so loose. It's really not going to make that much of a difference. But I do know people that intentionally make sure it's long enough that that arrow will fit through that hole. But you don't necessarily have to. It's personal preference. We haven't noticed a difference in shooting. We still shoot fish. So good question, though. Great question. Any more questions about setting up a bow fishing bow?
I want to talk about how to connect the string to the bottom of the bottle.
Ah, that's a good one.
Hey, we got a question maybe more
So
about the fish
putting
we
line on
shoot.
your reel. Now, when you buy we're getting there. That's the next one. That's the next section is what kinds of fish can we harvest? But as far as your bottle goes, now, when you buy one, it's going to come full of line. But eventually, your line's going to get a bunch of memory to it. Just like a fishing reel, all that line wrapped up, it starts getting kinky.
Short from having to change arrows.
If you change arrows a lot and you cutting it, it gets short. So you'll want to replace that line eventually. Justin's going to show you how to do that.
All right, so to start off, you're going to feed your line all the way through this reel from the back side, and then as you see, I just let it all hit the floor. Now you're going to leave enough hanging out so that you can tie using the exact same knot we use to tie the arrow. You're going to run it through this plastic piece that will then stick into the back of the reel. Now after you do that, then you've got all of your line on the ground. So what you're going to want to do is take the end of it and you're going to run it through the back side of your arrow, your reel, where your bottle would screw on. And there's a pretty obvious hole that will come out right past where your trigger connects to the line. So after you do that, then all you do is screw your reel back onto the rest of the housing. And then you will just reel your line up just like you would as if you were reeling your arrow back in. And a lot of times you'll want to point this slightly upwards, because what it will do is allow your line to fall into the back of the bottle a little better. I'm sorry.
That's a common issue where your bottle's not wanting to feed right and you can't get your line to go in. Usually it's because you were pointing the bottle down as you reeled and it didn't want to feed it right. So if you ever have that kind of issue, let all your line out, tilt your arrow and or tilt your bottle to where it's facing up, and then reel it in so it feeds it better. Are we good on equipment? Moving on to fish.
Thumbs up, everybody.
Can you show how you put the arrow on that rest with the string on?
Yeah. I'll simply remove it, pull it to the side, and it will just slide on there. I'll do that again. And then it just simply knocks onto the string.
And a big thing to remember with these, so your arrows are going to have this little black piece on the back that keeps your slide on your arrow, but you need to make sure that's pointed up so it doesn't hit your rest as it's flying out. And you want to make sure your slide's on the outside of your rest.
Yes, very good point.
If you have your arrow knocked to where this is down, you will notice your arrow will basically do flips in the air as you shoot.
I actually watched somebody, I didn't watch them knock it like this, but I watched them shoot, and it really messed up their rest because that was pointed down. So you can do some damage if you don't remember to make sure that this stop is pointed up.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what she said, sometimes this line, you get a little extra out here, it'll get wrapped around this handle or something. You just want to make, or it get back behind the rest. You just want to make sure this line is free and not wrapped around anything before you shoot. Just to show a different type of rest here. So Justin's bow has a little bit different of a rest, but basically all you'll do is you just snap it in there, and then you can slide it and knock it. Is that good, Rafaelito?
Yeah, that answered that question. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Moving on from equipment. And like I said, if you have a question, something just hits you later about equipment, you can come back to it. It's no big deal. What kinds of fish are legal to harvest in Kentucky? The best thing about Kentucky is we have so many different types of fish you can shoot. And there are fish all over the state. Now, don't get me wrong. We live in Western Kentucky. It's the best place for bow fishing. I won't lie. You got lots of swamps, shallow water, and every species that's legal in Kentucky is in Western Kentucky. But that doesn't mean you can't go anywhere else and bow fish. We grew up in Georgetown. We grew up around Elkhorn Creek. We have seen several fish be shot at Elkhorn Creek. There's a lot of common carp. Well, let's get to the species itself. So any rough fish can be harvested with a bow, okay? And when we're talking about rough fish, we're talking about fish that are not game species. Game species have a creel limit or a size limit or a possession limit. So basically, you're talking about your bass. You're allowed, most of the time you're allowed 5. Depending on where you're at, there's these different size limits. You know, crappie, all those fish you cannot shoot with a bow. If it is a game fish, you cannot shoot with a bow. Now, the 2 exceptions that have a limit on them that you can't shoot with a bow: catfish and paddlefish. Okay, paddlefish you're allowed 2 a day per person, and catfish you're allowed 5 per person. Those are the only 2 that have a limit that are technically, well, no, catfish are considered rough fish. What about paddlefish? I'm not real sure if paddlefish are considered rough fish or game fish.
Paddlefish have a limit on them.
Say what?
They have a limit on them.
I know they have a limit, but I wonder if because catfish have a limit, but they're still considered a rough fish. It's kind of weird. That's a gray area right there. But just so you know, you're allowed 2 paddlefish and up to 5 catfish. If you do shoot a paddlefish or a catfish, you cannot just let it go if you decide you don't want to keep it. Once you shoot it, it's yours, and you're in possession of it, and you got to take it home with you. Other fish you can shoot. So let's talk about gar. That's probably the most common species or common fish you can shoot across the state. You cannot shoot alligator gar. This is a hard one because it's very, very hard to tell juvenile alligator gar from a spotted gar, or especially spotted gar, because they're very similar when they're young. I'll go ahead and tell you right now, if you see just a giant 10-foot gar out there, don't shoot it because it's an alligator gar. The other gar species we have do not get that big. We've got spotted gar, we've got long-nosed gar, we've got short-nosed gar. And they're found all over the state, literally everywhere, aren't they? And you can go anywhere and shoot those. The Kentucky River, I can remember when we were kids kayaking the Kentucky River, we would have had a heyday if we were bow fishing back then because they were just everywhere. So you don't have to necessarily live in Western Kentucky. Elkhorn Creek, they got common carp, they've got suckers, they've got gar. Yeah. They've got fish you can shoot. Laurel Lake, we grew up carp fishing in Laurel Lake. The carp are there. You can shoot them. Let's see what else out in eastern Kentucky. Mainly you're going to be looking at your gar, probably your common and maybe grass carp, and then buffalo and drum are pretty much everywhere in the state too. Those are going to be your main species that you're going to get on in eastern Kentucky. The hardest part about eastern Kentucky bow fishing is most of the lakes are pretty deep and there's not a whole lot of shallow spots. And you really, to get onto those fish, or those shallow spots are the best places, especially in the spring when they're spawning. They'll get up in the shallows and spawn and there'll be fish everywhere. You can shoot them then, but when you have a lot of deep water, sometimes it's hard to find those fish. Does anybody have any questions about
you want to touch on the grass carp? There are certain lakes in Kentucky that you can't shoot the grass carp, ones that the department are managing. I would just look into your regulations if you have any questions on that, and you can always call your game warden as well if you have questions.
Yeah.
As to which lakes you can and can't take grass carp out of.
Yeah, the regulations are a little hard to understand. We've been reading them and trying to understand them, and sometimes, there's just some gray areas. From what we read, it says you can't shoot or catch with a pole. You have to release any grass carp in a lake that is managed or owned by Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. But then there's nothing telling you in there that we could find that you can't shoot catfish at like a Finn's Lake or something. Now, I'm not saying it's legal because we couldn't find anything that said it was legal, but we couldn't find anything that said it was illegal at the same time. So that's why he said, call your game warden. Before you do it, just call your local game warden. Hey, we're thinking about bow fishing out here. Is this legal? Because it's a little, and with all laws and, sometimes there's some gray areas and you want to make sure that you're legal. You don't want to be out there and have a game warden come up on you and wondering what you're doing. Just call ahead of time. That way you're good to go. Also, got to have a fishing license. Got to have a fishing license to bow fish in Kentucky. You'll hear people say, well, you can do it with a hunting or a fishing license. No, got to be a fishing license, okay? It is kind of hunting, but you're hunting after fish. So got to have that fishing license. And remember that when you buy that fishing license, where does that money go? That goes into managing these fish that you are you're either shooting with a bow or fishing with a rod and reel or the deer and stuff, the management, all those license fees, they come back to Fish and Wildlife so that we can manage the animals that you hunt. So remember that when you go to buy your hunting. Good question.
Hey, Courtney, we're using the term sport fish and rough fish. Could you define those a little bit more for someone who might not, we're saying it, but they're not maybe understanding exactly what we talk about when we say sport fish or rough fish?
Okay, so basically sport fish have a limit, have a creel limit and a size limit. So like bass, they have to be 15 inches in Kentucky Lake. They have to be 15 inches before you can keep one, and you're only allowed to keep up to 5. Okay, they've put a limit on that fish. It's a sport fish because people are going after it. We have to put that limit on it to make sure that that population is not hurt by us out here fishing. We're managing that population, and we're trying to make sure that it sustains itself and is healthy. Rough fish, and same with crappie, same with other fish that have limits like that. Rough fish are an abundance. They're not usually a fish that people go after to eat, although you can. We can talk about that a little bit. But most people don't look at a gar and think, man, I would love to fry some of that up, right? It's good. Don't get me wrong. I've had it. It's great as long as you eat it hot. If you let it get cold, it gets a little rubbery. But that's your main difference there between the sport and rough. Sport fish, people are actually actively seeking these fish for filling their freezer, having a big fish fry and stuff. As far as, or for tournaments, there's a lot of bass tournaments, crappie tournaments around. Your rough fish, they're kind of low man. They're kind of the redheaded stepchild. People like us, we love them. But most people don't really care much about a drum swimming out in the water. They don't really care about a gar. Most people look at a gar and think, I'm not getting in the water now because I just saw something that looks kind of like a little gator swimming around. So does that kind of clear that up a little bit?
So a comment was made about realizing that the fish we're shooting with those barbs, this isn't really a catch and release fishing.
Okay, yes, so this is not catch and release fishing. So these fish, when you harvest one, you bring it into the boat, you either take it home and eat it, or you can release it back into the water. But releasing it back in the water, it's been shot, it's probably gonna die, right? So what you do is, instead of just throwing it on the bank or just letting it float down the river,
don't do that.
Yeah, do not throw it on the bank or do not let it float down the river. First of all, it's illegal, and that's littering. But second of all, if you've ever been to a bank or a boat ramp where someone's done that, it smells so awful, and it really puts a bad name in the sport of boat fishing. There are so many people out there that just hate boat fishing who've never done it, but they hate it because they can't stand to go to a boat ramp and put their boat in because it stinks so bad. So do not just throw your fish out. First off, before you do, you have to pop the swim bladder, okay? Fish have an air bladder that helps them float and stay upright. If you pop that, all you need is just a little pocket knife.
Something about fishing in Kentucky.
And then you let that fish go, it will sink, and you're basically just feeding all the other fish. You throw it up on the bank, you're not feeding anything. You might as well feed the fish. Yeah, maybe a raccoon, but we don't want to feed the trash pandas. We have plenty of those. So you want to pop that swim bladder, you want to throw it back into the water, or take it home and clean it and eat it. We have eaten gar, we have eaten Asian carp. We haven't got to Asian carp yet, but they can be very good to eat. Buffalo ribs, you get cold water buffalo ribs, that's about as best as you can get right there. That's really good fish. But people look at those fish and they don't think that they're good to eat because everybody hears about the crappie and the bluegill. Everyone wants to eat bluegill and catfish and crappie. Don't get me wrong, I love a good bluegill and crappie fry. But there are other fish out there that can taste just as good. Is that kind of answer that pretty good? All right, we need to talk about the Asians. Actually, before we get on the Asian fish, I talked about there's a daily krill limit for rough fish, or only for catfish and paddlefish. So remember, we're talking about the difference between sport fish and rough fish. Yes, 9 times out of 10, it has to do with that limit and the size limits and stuff. But for catfish, you're only allowed 5, even though they are rough fish, and paddlefish are only allowed 2. We've had issues in the past, over the years, of people harvesting a lot of paddlefish to cut their eggs out, to cut the roe out, and then they sell that roe as caviar. So we had to do something on a management standpoint to make sure that those paddlefish were not over-harvested, because people were basically just cutting the fish open, taking the eggs out, and throwing the fish back in the water because they didn't care anything else about it. So we had to put some limits on there to kind of make sure that doesn't happen. But that makes you sick because paddlefish is excellent to eat. And paddlefish is a really cool fish. They're kind of like a shark, basically. They don't have bones. When you clean them, you pull out the big spinal column, and it's not bones. It's just rubber and cartilage, and they're pretty cool fish. If you ever see one swimming on the surface, they got a fin that looks just like a shark. It's a really neat fish to shoot. And we've shot several paddlefish over the years down at Kentucky Dam. So the one thing that Western Kentucky has over the rest of the state as far as bow fishing goes, we have Asian carp. Now, yes, the grass carp is an Asian carp, okay? We kind of tend to think of grass carp as a native species because they've been here forever, but they're not. They are an Asian invasive species, okay? Just like the Asian carp you hear about, the big head carp and the silver carp, okay? You've probably seen on TV the carp shooting out of the air and knocking people out of boats and stuff. That's your silver carp. When they get scared, they'll jump up in the air, flop around. I've about seen him get knocked out of a boat several times from a fish. One come up, smacked him 3 times in the face, and then went down. I mean, it's impressive, the acrobatics that they can do. Big head carp, they get huge. They are one of the fish that most bow fishermen like. They just seek that giant big-headed carp. And we're talking, like, you can shoot fish over 50 pounds easily when you start getting into big-headed carp. They get big, and they're a lot of fun. Buffalo, they get pretty big, and they're everywhere. We've shot 30, 40 pounds.
40 to 50 pounds quite often. Too.
Yeah. We've shot several big buffalo. But I would say probably the buffalo, the grass carp, and the big head carp are the 3 big species that you go after. Like when we're tournament fishing, that's what we want. We want big buffalo, big grass carp, or big heads, because those are your biggest fish that you're going to go after. Gar, you know, they get big. I mean, we've shot gar that were 4 foot long.
They just don't have the weight.
They don't have the weight to them. They're skinnier, and I mean, don't get me wrong, they still may weigh 30 pounds, but compared to a couple big heads, it's not much there. So the Asian carp are found in the Tennessee River. They're found in the Cumberland River. They are found in the Ohio River. They are found in Kentucky Lake, and they are found in Barkley Lake. They are basically anything, the Mississippi River, anything attached to the Mississippi River, tributaries, Kentucky and Barkley Lake. They're kind of making their way up north, but as far as Kentucky goes, you're only going to find them on the western end or on the Ohio going up through there. They're a lot of fun to fish for because they travel in large packs or large schools, basically. We were telling Nancy and them earlier, when you're down below the dam and you're sitting there, it's all dark, and Justin hits that light on the boat, and hopefully we'll be able to show you that in just a little bit. All of a sudden, you've got 200 fish on the surface in front of you. It's really crazy, but it's a lot of fun.
At that point, it becomes which fish do I want to shoot?
Yes. At that point, you're trying to pick out the biggest one before they disappear. But it's a lot of fun, but the bad thing is they are invasive. If you bow fish down here, you will learn really quick that the Asian carp are taking over and have taken over. You go down below the dam, you see thousands of those things. I mean, it's sad, but, you know, we're trying to do our part. We shoot as many of them as we can, pop the swim bladder, throw them back.
Make the best of it.
We make the best of it. We have fun while we do it, but we're also, we're committing conservation. That's basically, we are committing conservation when we go out and shoot these fish. A lot of people don't like that we're shooting fish and just letting them go, but it's not like this is a sport fish. It's not like this is a fish that's even supposed to be here. I don't know. There's a lot of efforts that's been going on with Fish and Wildlife to try and take more of these fish out of the lake. We have gathered up thousands and thousands of pounds of these Asian carp, but there are still plenty out there. So if you are interested in it, get out there and shoot some Asian carp for sure. Whether it's big heads or the silvers. But I will say silvers are a lot more prevalent than the big heads. We'll see 400 silvers to every 1 or 2 big heads, probably.
Hey, Courtney.
Go ahead.
Hey, heads up, the monsoon has stopped if you all want to try to show them the boat.
Okay. Let's see where I'm at here.
Hey, I got
actually, the next section is
We got
make your
one more
boat.
question popping in here real quick.
Go ahead.
Have you ever thought about making a video showing us how to pop that belly or that bubble?
We have made this video. It's still in the editing process. I made it a few weeks ago with one of our techs that's no longer with us. And so we're going to finish editing that, and that will be posted online. But I can say, I don't have a good example here, but you go behind the dorsal fin and up just a little. DJ, you may be able to explain this a little better maybe. It's behind the dorsal fin and up just a little bit. But here's the thing. You've already stabbed this fish with an arrow. Stab it a few times until you hear.
You will hear the pop.
You will hear. It's like popping, not quite like popping a balloon,
Like
but
bubble
you are
gum.
popping a bubble of air, a bladder of air in that fish. So you'll hear it when you do it. And don't get me wrong, I have stabbed fish several times before I ever actually hit the swim bladder, just trying to get the right spot. But there will be a video come out before too long that we'll post online of how to do that. I did a little short bow fishing video before we even did the, before we even got into the virtual bow stuff. And I wanted to have it uploaded for this, but we didn't get it finished editing in time. So, but it will go up, and our fish tech at the time, he actually shows exactly where to puncture a silver carp. He had a silver carp in that video. So that was a great question, though. I had a feeling that one was going to come up.
Just use caution when you go to stab, especially with the fish. These rough fish tend to have larger scales, and the knife blade may tend to slip. So just be careful.
Yeah, for sure. Be very careful. Sometimes you get lucky and you shoot them in the swim bladder, and then you don't even have to poke them because you've already done it. All right, so do we want to move down to the boat real fast? Because the next section is banker boat and then day or night. So we're excited to show y'all. They bought a new boat this year, and we'll talk about it when we get down there. But if you give us like 2 minutes, we will reconvene down at the boat.
Nancy, you want to put me on mute?
All right, we're going to mute them just for a second. You're going to see him walk behind me. All right. So, yeah, the weather kept us inside here this morning, or this afternoon. So they're going to head back down to the water. You get a view of Kentucky Lake there in the background. Isn't it fun to watch the racing truck right now? So if you've got questions real quick, as they move down there, it won't take them but just a couple minutes as they move down there. Is there any questions you all may have that I can try to answer? Either about what they have talked about or maybe our bow weekends. We've still got a lot of things coming up, including the virtual campfire tonight.
Do you have any resources to help identify, do you have any resources to help identify the different types of fish?
Yeah, if you get on our website, there is a fishing ID booklet PDF file, and you can look on there. That helps a lot. I actually got to go out bow fishing with them. It was one of my Fishing Life bucket list things last night, and just listening to them, it kind of helped me learn to identify some of them. Once you're out there, it helps a lot because once you see them moving and you're out with someone who knows what they are, that's going to help a lot too. But if you look at those pictures on online, we've got that'll get you started. But once you're out there bow fishing, once they start moving around, especially if you're out with someone who knows what they're doing, like Courtney and Jodessa, that helps a lot too because they can look at it and go, this is this and this is that. A lot of times it seems like the bass and whatnot are moving much, much faster. So you kind of let those go, although they may tell you different. Because I'm the newbie in the bunch with this kind of thing.
Hey, Nancy.
Uh-huh.
Nancy, also, if you, I don't know if you guys have a copy of the Hunter Ed manual that you take when you go through hunter education. If you don't have one, try and get one because in the back half of that book, there's pictures of every type of fish that is in native state of Kentucky. So it's one way to start, and it will have some, and then there are others that aren't in there. And right now they're actually doing a Fish ID Friday where they're actually putting online a new fish every Friday afternoon.
Yeah, we've been playing a lot with our social media here lately, throwing that kind of stuff up there. And you can see they're down now at our boat dock here at Camp Curry is where they're at. All right, let's get them back online here.
Okay, so I heard that question earlier. Nancy hit the nail on the head. It is a little intimidating at first to think, oh man, I have to identify these fish while they're underwater. Most of the time, most of the fish that you can shoot that you're going to see in these shallow waters are going to be fish that are legal. Don't get me wrong. Every now and again, you will see a bass. You will see, what else have we seen? We've seen a saugeye before. We've seen bass.
Crappie once or
We've
twice.
seen a couple crappie. But for the most part, most fish that you're going to see in those shallow areas at night are going to be legal fish. And if you've ever waterfowl hunted, I can tell you right now, for me learning to identify a duck in the air, I would have never been able to do that if I didn't have somebody standing beside me saying, now, do you see the difference between that mallard and that gadwall? Or, you know, it's the same. If you have somebody with you that knows what they're talking about, that really helps. And I know sometimes it's hard to find a mentor like that, but that's one of the reasons we like to do this. If we didn't have to do this virtually, I mean, you get to go out and actually see different fish and be able to identify them a little bit better. But like Nancy said, once you get out there and start seeing them, it doesn't take long to realize just the way they swim sometimes you can identify a fish. Common carp, they tend to just kind of sit there. They don't like to take off as quick, whereas a bass, they're usually, as soon as they see you, they're gone. Like, they don't hang around very long. They're smart. Catfish are usually pretty slow. They usually kind of hang out. Catfish are a little bit easier to identify just from the shape of the head and stuff. But it's a practice thing, and it's a look at pictures, but they do look different underwater versus on a magazine or on the internet. But a good start would be to go online and look at that fish ID, get a good idea that way, and then once you get out on the water, start looking and stuff. And, you know, once you shoot a fish, look it over, check it out. Sometimes we shoot fish that we're just like, man, this is such a pretty fish, and we're all looking at it and taking pictures of it. Sometimes there's you'll shoot some carp that are called mirror carp. It's basically, you know, a common carp that has a little bit of genetic, basically the scales will look like a rainbow on it. They're really pretty. I've only seen one, and it was shot here in Kentucky Lake. It was really cool. But yeah, just check out your fish. Spend as much time as you can just trying to practice that. And it take a little bit of time, but eventually you'll be able to just look at a fish swimming across and be like, oh, well, there went a grass carp. You know, that was a skinny, longer fish. More than likely, that was a grass carp.
And that, like they said, some fish will actually be easy to identify. The gar, for example, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see more gar than you do carp on any body of water that you're fishing. And those are very easy to identify. They'll sit right on top of the water. A lot of times you can run over them with the trolling motor if you're on the boat. They don't like to move. They can be a hard target to hit and make new bow fishers a little frustrated because they are a lot skinnier and a little tougher to hit. But chances are you're going to get a lot more shots at them. And as you do start to get into this sport, it will give you a lot of practice in the beginning.
Bigger fish are way easier to hit, for sure. The bigger the target, the easier it is to hit. We laugh because we'll miss 4 or 5 5-pound common carps, but then we got a 20, 30-pound grass carp come through, and we all stick an arrow in it. We're like, yeah, we just needed a bigger fish. That's all we needed. So now that we're down here on the water, you can see this beautiful Kentucky lake here. We got a little bit of rain going, but it definitely doesn't dampen our style any. We are sitting here, Justin and Jodessa have their boat here with us, and just kind of get a good look at that. And basically, so banker boat. Now, yes, we've got this awesome boat here that we love to fish off of, but we definitely spend a fair amount of time fishing from the bank.
Right.
It really just depends on the day. So, like, if it's daytime and there's no clouds, it's really sunny, and we know of some areas that you can't get to by boat, and that really, boats can hinder you because they can only go so shallow. But I take my shoes off and I can go in, this much water. We have been known to abandon the boat and walk out into shallow water after fish. So fishing from the bank can give you some advantages of being able to get into shallower water. Advantage of a boat is you can cover a lot more water in a shorter time. If you're walking, you cover a cove or two and you're going to be exhausted. But with a boat, you can run in and hit coves a lot quicker. When it's daylight and, you know, it's high noon and that sun's just directly over, it's hitting that water perfect. You can see down in that water. So we'll do a lot of bait fishing that time. If the only thing about that is you have to kind of pay attention to the sun and the clouds. If it's really cloudy, it actually makes it harder to see in the water. I recommend polarized sunglasses. I've left mine up at the hill, but DJ's got some here. You can get these for like $10 at Walmart. They're not expensive, but the key thing that you're looking for is polarized. You will not believe the difference in me sitting here looking at the water and then putting these polarized sunglasses up, and I can see at least 2 foot deeper in the water. It really makes a big difference being able to see the fish. And if you can't see them, you can't shoot them, right? So you want something so that you can see in the water. Wind is a big factor with bow fishing. It's the same difference. If the wind's blowing and it's causing ripple across the water, you're not going to be able to see past, you know, maybe a foot underwater. So that really limits your view, and you won't be able to see those fish down there. So if it's windy and it's cloudy, we will not do the bank shooting. We will more than likely wait till it gets dark. And why do we wait till it gets dark? Because the wind usually dies when it gets dark. In Western Kentucky, I mean, it's usually either blowing 20 miles an hour or there's nothing. It's all or nothing down here half the time. And so we will wait till dark just to be able to get out of the wind. And then plus, you know, you could see pretty good with the sun at high noon, but it's not going to compare to these lights in the water, unless the water's super muddy. And we've had some muddy water lately with all the rain. But if the water's clear, I mean, how far do you think your visibility would be?
I'd say on some of the more clear water in eastern or northern Kentucky, I would guess every bit of 6 foot.
Oh, yeah. It'd be hard to shoot a fish at 6 foot.
Right.
But, I mean, you can see it. If you can't see them, you can't shoot them, right? So that's a big advantage to the boat, is just being able to have those lights exactly where you want them and being able to see deeper in the water. But you don't have to have a boat. I mean, my first time ever bow fishing was just walking the banks here at camp and shooting gar off the bank. You don't have to have that boat. And you don't have to have a big, nice, fancy boat. Justin, tell us about your first bow fishing boat.
So my first bow fishing boat, I set up, I already had the boat. I went bow fishing for my first time and decided, yeah, this is something I'm going to get into. So I had a 14-foot John boat. And what I did was I actually went on Amazon and I ordered 3 of these light bars. I believe the first 2 I bought were around $100 at the time. Now you can find them for about $30 a piece on Amazon. And what I did was, for the 3 light bars, I had them rigged up, one on the front of the John boat and one on each side. And I had them on plugs where I could just plug them in, and they were wired to one single 12-volt battery. And I believe at the time I was getting about 4 hours out of that one battery with 2 to 3 of these light bars. At the time I had a foot-controlled trolling motor, so we would stand and work the trolling motor, and we had just 3 of these light bars, and we would do a lot of fishing right here around the banks of Kentucky Lake. We would shoot nice buffalo, gar, everything that we shoot now, we shot back then. I will say the extra lighting definitely helps. It gives you a lot longer time to get on the fish and shoot it before it gets out of the light. But that doesn't mean you need a big setup by any means. Like I said, my first John boat was 14 foot, and we would stack 3 of us on it with life jackets and just stay out of the main water. We would fish mostly calmer water back in the bays.
So a little bit else to add to that a little bit. Justin has had, what, 4 bow fishing boats
yes,
now?
This
is the 4th one. So his first one was a 14-foot John boat. His second one was a 24-foot pontoon. Then he got another big 24-foot pontoon, and then they got this boat right here. The pontoon was a lot of fun. He got it when we were in college, and it doubled as, you know, we could go out on a lake and fish and have fun, or we could go out and bow fish. I mean, it was a great all around boat. And he could shoot, what, 6 people off that thing?
Right, I could fit 6, even 8 people during the daylight because I could spread them out on the boat a little more, and you didn't have to rely on the lights towards the front of the boat. But the good thing about the pontoons, I believe both of them I found for around $3,000. They were late 80 to early 90 model engines on both, and they both lasted me a couple years apiece. So for about $3,000, I got 2 to 3 years out of the pontoon without any issues at all, and was able to bow fish multiple people at one time.
And some of these lights on this boat right here came from your original boat.
Actually, 4 of these lights I've had since 2014 from my original bow fishing boat. And they've lasted me that long.
So you've invested in several boats, but as far as the equipment that goes on them, it's lasted.
Right,
and it's
most
really,
of it lasted really long time.
held up good. You know, another advantage to a boat is you can get out in deep water. And when you're talking about Asian carp, as far as like the big head, most of the time big heads you're going to find in deep water. We rarely see them in shallow water. So if you're going after a target species like big head, you're probably going to want a boat. Now, I mentioned in the thing that, you know, I've rarely seen people shoot them from the bank. It's possible, though. That's not necessarily true.
It depends on where you're at.
It depends on where you're at. If you're down at the dam, all that water's deep. They could be right there close because that water's deep. And if you're like right on the bank of the Mississippi and they're cruising the banks of the deep water, you could theoretically shoot them. But as far as probably 90% of the shoreline in Kentucky, you're probably not going to shoot a big head garf or a big head carp from the bank. That's kind of an advantage to a boat right there. But I mean, my biggest buffalo was shot from the road. There was when the Mississippi or the Ohio, when they flood that backwater, we will walk roads that are flooded in that backwater and just look for fins and look for movement. And my biggest buffalo carp was shot just in a t-shirt and sandals walking down a road. I mean, you don't have to get that fancy with it. You can do it any way you want, really. So we're kind of getting low on time here. So the last topic before we get to the questions is day or night. I'm gonna go ahead and start for me. Personally, I like daytime because I don't like messing up my sleep schedule. Justin works night shift, so it means nothing to him. He's up all night all the time.
I'm on the perfect shift to both fish.
Yes. Now, don't get me wrong. I love fishing at night just because of the lights and getting to see the fish swim around. But I love a good day where the sun's just right, there's no wind, and you can go out and hammer some fish from the bank or even from a boat in the daylight. Nighttime, it's great if, you know, because you get out of the wind, you can use lights, and you can get to places that you can't always get to by foot. So like I said, it's all personal preference, but you really got to watch the weather because the weather can mess with you. If it's raining, you're not going to be able to see. If it's windy, you're not going to be able to see. As the sun's going down, like if you're fishing in the daylight, that last 30 minutes of daylight, you won't be able to see anything. The twilight hour, yeah. As that sun's going down, the way it reflects on the water, I mean, when we're out at Kentucky Lake or out on the dam, that last like hour before sunset, we just kind of hang out. You know, everybody, this is the time to eat your supper and get ready for the night fishing because we got to kind of wait because you really can't see anything at that time of day. But, you know, it really doesn't matter. Whatever works for you is good. What do you think? What's your favorite?
That's a tough question. Like Courtney said, in the daytime I enjoy it because, for one, I like being out in the sun. But on top of that, when you are fishing at night with lights, you are a little secluded to the area right around the boat. As we're in the daytime, you can often make a lot farther shots because you can see those fish a lot better outside of your range of motion from the lights.
That makes sense.
So that is one. When I do get on fish very well during the day, normally I enjoy that more at night. But on average, I can get on more fish at night because
on average, we probably do better.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say nighttime is probably easier just because you're controlling the conditions a little more as far as the light. I'd say during the daytime, like it almost has to be perfect for you to be able to see in the water. So, but I've had one of my best bow fishing experiences during the daytime.
Actually, your first.
My very first time, I got a little spoiled.
Got spoiled on it. Like shooting a monster buck the first time you go hunting. That kind of happened to Joe Dessa. But something else too to add, if you don't have a boat, that doesn't mean you can't have lights. They make lights that go on your bow fishing boat that you can walk the bank all night long and shine and shoot fish. I used to have a light on my bow fishing boat before he really got set up good with the light situation. And they work great, and they're not super expensive. Heck, I've seen people just tape a flashlight to their bow. You really don't have to get too fancy with it. But yeah, you can still fish with lights at night from the bank. It doesn't necessarily have to be just during the daytime.
To top off on that, we had friends in college. They would, two in particular, one went and bought a bow, the other one went and bought a reel. So they split the cost, and then they went in together and bought a big spotlight. And what they would do is go down below the dam and take turns. I believe every time one of them shot, whether they missed or hit a fish, they would swap out holding the spotlight and getting to use the bow. So if you're worried about price, you really can make this cheap. Is your bow that we got at the pawn shop in here?
Yeah, it's in that compartment right
This bow we're about to show you, we actually stumbled upon it at a pawn shop. From looking at it, I couldn't tell that it had ever even been shot. We couldn't find a scratch on it. Brand new, this bow would have cost about $250 to $300, but we just happened to get lucky and stumble upon this fully set up for $100. That was the bow, the reel. I believe it had an arrow on it, everything for $100. You just never know when you might come across something like that at a pawn shop and get lucky.
Check your local pawn shops. Yeah. Check your local pawn shops. Even just for like a cheap hunting bow that you want to turn over into a bow fishing bow, like that's a great, you can go get a $50 little compound bow at a pawn shop a lot of times.
It's a great place to look for a new first bow, especially if you're not wanting to spend $300 to $400.
Okay,
Courtney,
so
Justin, did y'all talk a bit? I don't think we talked about this, or I may have missed it. Someone was asking about, can you talk a little bit about how you aim when you shoot?
Yes.
Shot place.
Yes.
You
Okay,
want to
so
go over it as a
yeah. So after you get your arrow loaded here, this is one of those things that practice makes perfect. So when you shoot a regular bow, you've got sights and stuff. This is all instinctual. Okay, this is almost like shooting a recurve bow. Well, you know how the sights, you're almost using the arrow to aim, but it's more of an instinctual thing. And here's another thing too: the water reflects. Sorry, the image of the fish. So when you're looking at a fish underwater, it looks like it's up here, but really it's down here. So you always want to shoot low. Unless that fish's fin is coming out the surface of the water, if it's underwater, you always want to shoot low. And depending on how deep it is the lower you need to go when you're aiming. And that honestly just takes practice, practice, practice. Because this is so different. If you're a bow hunter, it's kind of hard to switch over to bow fishing right at first because it's so instinctual, and when you draw back, you're trying to make sure you have the perfect stance and everything. And with bow fishing, it's not like that. Sometimes you have to like lean over the boat, or sometimes you have to like draw really fast, or this fish is fixing to take off. So it's definitely a different ball game. It's very instinctual. So Justin, go ahead and draw back. This bow has let off. So he is draw back. He's going to look at that fish out in the water. And if it's 1 foot to 2 foot deep, he's probably going to aim about 1 foot low, right? And he's going to aim right under that fish and shoot. You will miss. You will miss lots and lots of fish. I promise you. We all have, and we still do. I mean, all the time. I got lucky last night and shot a couple of fish, but we really just didn't see a ton last night. But I have nights where I can't hit nothing. I mean, it just happens. But it's all instinctual, and you really have to just practice it. If you've ever shot a recurve bow, you'll know what we're talking about. You want to just shoot into the water?
Yeah. And then we can let them see how you reel the arrow in. As soon as your arrow hits, you're going to want to grab that trigger that we talked about earlier. Start reeling it in. The faster you reel your arrow in, the less likely you are to get it hung on a brush pile or whatever might be under the
Be careful shooting in amongst like roots and stuff. If there's a bunch of lily pads around, you get your arrow stuck in a lily pad root ball at the bottom, it's gone. You might as well cut that sucker off. You will not get it back.
And just to touch on back on the aiming aspect, if you've ever shot a bow, I will bring this bow's draw length is a little short, but when it comes to bow fishing, it's not as important. Like we said, it's not as particular as bow hunting. But bring your right hand or left hand if you're left-handed up and kind of anchor it to your cheek, and then use the tip of your arrow to kind of aim. And I tend to put it right at the belly of the fish if the fish is just fully submerged, and if it's really deep, I'll probably aim just under the belly of the fish.
Hey, Courtney, a couple more questions here. What poundage would you all recommend on a bow if someone was looking to maybe get a bow for bow fishing?
Okay, so that's going to depend on a lot of different things. Look at Jodessa and I here. We are two totally different sized women, and we pull totally different sized bows. And she can shoot just as many fish as I can, but it all depends on what you can do. Go to a local archery shop, talk with try a few different bows. Remember, don't dry fire them. If you're going to pull a bow back, do not let it go without an arrow on it. But to be able to penetrate a fish, I'm going to recommend, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to say anywhere between 25 pounds and 40 pounds is 40 to 45 pounds is like your best bow fishing bows. If you get into it and you're doing it a lot and you're doing tournaments and stuff, you're going to want to get up into those 35 to 45 poundage so that you can really get through those fish and make sure you don't lose them. But you can shoot a fish with 20 pounds, 25 pounds. That really doesn't matter. A lot that matters is what type of fish it is, what type of arrow you're using, and how far the fish is when you shoot. If you're shooting gar from here to, from here to Justin from me or something, you really don't need much because it's so close and you can penetrate that fish and get it up. But if you're shooting a gar that's 30 yards out, that's really hard. And gar have some really tough hide on them, and we scales. I know I like to call it hide because it's like hide, but I've seen arrows basically bounce off a gar before. They'll just hit them and kind of skin them at a far distance. So that extra poundage will help you hit them and make it stick. But you don't. Remember, you have to work up to that. Don't just think, okay, they recommended 40 pounds. I gotta go get a 40-pound bow. I didn't start at 40 pounds.
I'm pretty sure I started at 25, and I'm maybe at 32, 34 now.
So she's pulling 32 to 34 pounds and she's killing fish. She may not be able to shoot quite as far as we can.
And a lot of times I'll get backed up shots. But
yeah.
If you have someone else with you and you get a big fish, you're going to want that backed up shot anyway.
Yeah. So you really, anywhere between 25 to 45 pounds. I wouldn't go over 45 though, because like I said, you don't need to for one, and you're going to wear yourself out just constantly pulling. But I started the bow that I have now. I think we started with it on 30 pounds. Then I turned it up to 35, and now I'm at 40. Eventually, I'd like to get to 45, but I won't go over 45. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't want to wear myself out. I get tired enough standing up there holding a bow all night long. I don't want to go much higher than what I'm at now. I really like my poundage now. I'm penetrating fish good. And you can tell, like if you go out and you're shooting a lot and you're noticing a lot of arrows are pulling out of fish, it's probably because you need to up that poundage a little bit. And that's just kind of playing with it and yourself and what works for you. But if you can't pull 40 pounds, do not try. If you're trying to pull a bow that's way too heavy for you and you're struggling, for one, you're going to hurt yourself and you're going to be sore as heck and you're not going to be able to shoot properly. But for two, it can be dangerous. Especially you get to drawing several times in the night and you get shaky and you accidentally let go and you're not supposed to or something like that. It can get dangerous. So less is more. Just start low and work yourself up. And a lot of bows nowadays, they're not just set to 1 poundage. You can get a bow that will start at 20 pounds and go all the way up to 40 or 50 pounds. And every company makes a bow like that pretty much nowadays. So I recommend getting one that you can start at a lower poundage and work your way up to it when you're ready.
Justin, you want to show them that arrow and how you would take a fish off of it if you hit one?
Yes. So like we were looking at earlier, this is another one of the guard tip arrows. As you shoot the fish, these barbs will come to the side and keep the fish from pulling off. So as you pull the fish in, you'll pull the barbs out a little ways, loosen the tip, and then that will allow these barbs to turn backwards, and you can slide the arrow right back out through the fish to remove it.
Did y'all see that thumbs up, or was a hand in the way? Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure, saw a couple thumbs up there.
If there's not any more questions, I'd kind of like to show the boat a little bit here. I talked about the lights. So there's a generator on the back here that runs the main lights that are attached to the boat that came with the boat, the ones on the bottom. And then we added these lights to the boat for shooting Asian carp. Yeah. Those lights down at the bottom are great for running banks and shooting grass carp and whatever's on the bank. But when you're out trying to go after big heads and silver carp, they're very skittish of noise and light. So we will keep the boat completely black, no lights on at all. And then
Except for running lights.
Except for running lights, of course, our red and green and then our white in the back. But when we get to a spot and Justin's ready, he'll hit this Bigfoot switch and these lights will come on and you have about 10 seconds at the most to shoot a fish. Then they disappear and you troll a little bit further and then you'll hit the lights again and shoot fish that way. So this boat is technically set up to do just about any type of boat fishing you can imagine. And this is all added. Justin added all these lights here. He added a battery bank system. If anybody has any questions about electrical stuff and how to set up a boat, you got a boat you want to set up and you want to holler at us, email or phone call, Justin will be glad to help you out with that because he's set up so many now. He's got it down packed and knows how to do it. Bilge pump running. We got a lot of rain in the boat earlier, so we're having to pump it out. Other than that, this boat's pretty good size. We can shoot 7 people, 6, 7 people pretty comfortable up here. Any more than that, you get kind of tight. We can have 3 on each side and then 1 right up front. It's just one of those things, you know, we spent so much time bow fishing before he got the boat, his first one. Then he got that boat. And I mean, the more we just kept getting into it deeper and deeper and deeper, and Justin just kept upgrading and upgrading. And we, you know, and now we're at this point where we just have everything we need at this point. We can fish for any type of legal game, not game fish, legal rough fish. And it's a good time. It's a blast. We really enjoy it. And we like to hunt and fish a lot. And I'm not going to lie, I get a little depressed sometimes in the summertime that I can't go hunting with my bow, so we go bow fishing.
Another piece of equipment that we hadn't talked about yet is the gaff. So with bow fishing, a lot of times you've probably heard us mention shooting 30 to 40 pound fish. That's a lot more common than most people may think. So what we do is, anybody who's seen a gaff before, it's got a very sharp tip and a handle. And to get that fish into the boat, to get your arrow off, we will simply pull the fish towards the top of the water. And even on the bank, these can become very useful. They've got different lengths. I prefer the shorter lengths on the boat and the longer ones if we're on the bank. But it lets you get close to the water and you stab that fish and you'll pick it up. And at that point, normally you've got full control over that fish and you're not sitting there holding your arms wrapped around a real slimy carp as well.
Oh yeah, it keeps you a little bit cleaner, and it's great for taking pictures because you hold it up a lot easier.
Gives you a lot more control for pictures as well.
Because you got to take a picture of a big fish. I mean, you can't shoot a fish and not get a good picture with it.
Otherwise, it's just a story nobody believes.
A bunch of you,
Like
if you
yeah.
if you read what I put online for y'all, you'll see that I put a bunch of pictures in there. There's a picture of me and Justin on the boat with some silver carp. There's my picture of my big buffalo where I'm in that black t-shirt. That's the big one I told you about. I was just walking the road when I shot that fish. Trying to remember what else. There's a picture of Mamaw holding up a big grass carp. But yeah, was it a common carp? Okay. And then there's one picture of you in Whitehall standing on First Bridge. I mean, you don't have to be in a boat. You can be on a bridge. You can be on a bank, wherever you can see fish and shoot them. That's legal.
Very many times where we'll be looking for places to shoot fish, and we may come across somewhere, like Courtney said earlier, we can't get the boat in, so we'll either wait or just walk the bank, and sometimes that's better than even having a boat, just depending on the area.
All right. Other questions, guys? I know we are over time. We got them talking about something they love to do. So don't feel like you have to stay with us if you don't want to, but we're glad to hang out with you all. If there's other questions or if you want to hear them tell more stories. Although, Justin, I thought that was Jodessa's boat. I guess I was mistaken, my bad. So, like I said, if there's questions, if you don't want to stay with us, I know we're over time and some of you may have another class to go to, but we're glad to hang out with you all a little bit longer. If you all have any other questions or just want a little bit more info about what their equipment they're using or techniques they're using, or if you just want to hear them tell funny stories on each other.
There's just so much to it that can be to it. You don't have to put that much into it, but I mean, I feel like you could just talk for hours about all the things you could potentially do with bow fishing. And we definitely have some stories.
Nancy, tell me about
I'm sorry?
Getting on for the camp. Tell me about getting on for the campfire.
So my understanding is there is an email from Olivia that has a Zoom link in it that should be for the virtual campfire. Have you all gotten that? You know, that's my understanding. Okay. If you haven't, Judy, I'll get one, and I don't have it with me. Judy, my email is nancy.kiernan@ky.gov. If you want to drop me an email so that I have your email, I'll get that link for you if you don't have it. It's nancy.kiernan, K-I-E-R-N-A-N. And I believe it's at 7 o'clock Central Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Always make sure to tell both time zones because these Eastern Time people keep forgetting about us in Central Time down here. But that's we're going to do the virtual. Judy knows she's in Central Time too.
Hey, Nancy.
Uh-huh.
All the information on that campfire is now on the chat.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
So if you go on the chat, you can get everything you need is right on there. You just copy it and save it for the night.
Excellent. Thank you for doing that.
You're so handy, Rafaelito.
Yeah, he is, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh, you didn't tell me to come down there, right?
Do what?
That's why you didn't tell me to come down there, right?
I wish I could have, but we're kind of on lockdown. We're lucky to all of us be able to be together. We're all basically live together. I mean, we live 5 minutes from each other, so you know all this pandemic stuff's kind of throwing a wrench in everything. Next year, though.
Yes.
Next year, I'm really hoping
I can get my camera down there.
Yes, yeah. Bow here next year, and we will do some bow fishing out on this lake for sure.
I think that once you all try it, if it's anything like going out last night just for a few minutes, it is something that can be addicting. I'm just warning you now.
And Nancy, you
didn't even have a good night.
I don't even know. But it was just fun being out anyway. And
we saw some fish, we shot a few, but wait till you get into a group of Asian carp and there's just hundreds sitting there.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here making notes now as y'all talk about equipment. Okay, Christmas lists. I got to give everybody. Make them a Christmas
I was doing
list.
the same thing in your cast iron cooking.
Yeah, for
I got my Christmas list now.
That's what we've been doing at camp is if some of you, I think you've been with us for a couple other sessions, is we've been doing the cast iron cooking from here, fly fishing and bow fishing. So we've been talking fishing and eating a little too much so far this weekend.
Too much eating, for sure.
All right. Is there any other questions? We don't want to take up your all's time. We want to respect that, but we don't want to miss any questions if any of you all have one or just want to talk for a minute about bow fishing. Like I said, we're glad to hang out with you all. I don't see any questions popping up in chat. If you do have something you want to unmute and ask, that's cool too. But we don't want to keep you all unless you all do have some questions or want to chat with us for a few minutes.
Like I said, we're always here. You 6 months from now decide you get a bow and want to set it up and forgot how to set it up, shoot me an email. We'll get with you. Same, if you get a boat and you want to put some lights on it, but you're not quite sure what the best thing to use, whether it be LEDs or halogens or all that, just shoot me an email. We'll help you out.
And Jenny says she's got to go mow before the rain gets there. Jenny, you better, because it's going to be a monsoon if it's what we got.
All right.
All right. Hey guys, thank you all for hanging out with us. We appreciate y'all spending some time with us this afternoon. Hopefully we'll get to see some of you all tonight at the virtual campfire. We'll be around our campfire here. And if not tonight, maybe tomorrow we'll cross paths at some of those classes. Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Jodessa. Thanks, Justin. And we'll see you all hopefully again very, very soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.